Greetings, podcast listeners, and welcome to episode 4 of Becoming an Imagineer with Tom Thor Darson. In part 4 of Tom's journey to Imagineering, he'll continue his tale of working at Tokyo DisneySea and creating the Journey to the Center of the Earth attraction. It's an interesting tale. It's been great so far, and we're looking forward to part 4 and possibly even more. So sit back, relax, enjoy the story of becoming an Imagineer on All Things Thor.
Okay, so in the last episode on the subject of being an Imagineer and my personal experiences, I think I left off with the first 3 months, that I was there, and highlighted a few of the experiences there. So, the airplane. Yeah, I talked about the parabolic arc and all that kind of stuff when we were trying to decide on the design from a experiential but also an engineering standpoint. So then, probably 6-8 months into my employment there, as I was developing this ride, actually maybe not even that long. I mean, 6 months at the most. The team was sending us in groups of like 4 to 6 or 4 or 5 to the site that Tokyo DisneySea would be built. It was a landfill in Japan. So in other words, it was water before they, dumped massive quantities of soil and whatever else they do in order to create a platform for something to be built upon. And it was an extension of the existing Tokyo Disneyland. Now, again, I had been to Japan dozens of times before because I was the executive creative director for the Mitsubishi Corporation as before I was involved with Universal. And so you can imagine when you work for the Mitsubishi Corporation, 50% of my interaction was with executives that were Japanese. Now, they were trying to develop a creative division at that time. They were thinking about it, should I say. So, a lot of really impressive ex-Imagineers had worked there. Rolly Crump, not worked there, but they had tapped into their creativity and hired them on a freelance basis. So to do a theme park concept before I got there that actually never got off the ground. However, had beautiful artwork and models done for it, and so the place was in Glendale, and it was peppered on the walls with the artwork of Rolly Crump and John DeCure Jr. And others that you would all know. So they meant business. They were tapping into what they heard was talent that could help them achieve some of these accomplishments. And somehow, they had heard about me at not Universal. Where was I? Oh, I was still at Sequoia Creative, as the director of design there. And one of my former employees, who again, in this case I'll hold out on his name, but had left, and I supported his leaving the company that he was working for me, and went to Universal. And so he told the vice president of design there about me and his confidence that I could take on this position they were looking for, and that's how I got into Universal. And I've already told you about that whole experience. It didn't work out for me, even though I have great respect for the company. So anyway, back to Disney. So now they decided they were going to send us to Japan, not only to see this big dirt expansion where one day Tokyo DisneySea would be built, but also to experience the culture. Now, again, I had already experienced this, but I certainly wasn't going to say no. And it gave me the opportunity to develop a close friendship with 3 other coworkers. And one was a girl and 2 guys. One was responsible for the development of Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, a guy who's an amazing artist who I think I could do a podcast on alone about what an incredible experience and how much I valued our friendship and our conversations with each other. Anyway, rather than get into those things, I'll just tell you. So we end up going to Japan, and it was wild to be there. We got to meet some Imagineers who were stationed, I guess you could call it, in Japan, and I spent a lot of time there. And again, my experiences with Japan and developing relationships, friendships, business relationships, everything is that, there was an arm's reach sort of distance always. It wasn't like I could go there and think that everyone was going to accept me 100%. I mean, Japan and their culture is very, 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 it's very Japanese. What can I say? There's not a lot of diversity there. I mean, I think the first thing that struck me, at least then, was that 95 or more % of everyone on the subway, on the bullet train, on the streets, they were all Japanese. When I went to Tokyo Disneyland for the first time to experience it for research, I remember going down what was their version of Main Street. And it's enclosed because it rains a lot in Japan. And so if you imagine Disneyland in Anaheim with a big giant canopy over it made of glass, broken up, with structure, panels of glass and metal structure, and much wider than Main Street in Disneyland. That was the entrance area with all the retail stores and everything like that in Tokyo Disneyland. And I remember I'm not a particularly tall man. I'm about 6'1", which isn't shorter. It's not considered tall compared to other friends I have. But I remember walking down the Main Street, and it was so densely crowded that all I could see was a literal sea, spelled SEA, of dark-haired human beings that were just below my eye level. And it was really, it was just interesting. You knew you weren't, as they say in The Wizard of Oz, you weren't in Kansas anymore. And it was interesting. It was also, all the walkways and everything were so large and expanded because the amounts of visitors at that time in the Japanese Disney parks were pretty intense. So they had to make walkways and everything much wider, and there was a lot more expansion. It didn't have the small, more quaint feeling of Disneyland, for example. It was probably closer to Disney World, but I think even more expansive. So we went on this trip, and again, there was a lot of fun and frivolity between the four of us, as we experienced these various things, and yet. And so we got closer and closer. And like I said, that was the time when they admitted that when I first came on board, they all hated me, not knowing me. Because suddenly this guy comes out of nowhere where they had just had layoffs and they were afraid of their own jobs and blah, blah, blah. So it was a good job. I mean, a good trip for social bonding. And, but we went to, one of the things we did is we went to, I believe it was called Roppongi in Japan. It was basically chocked full of bars and nightclubs. So we learned the hard way that, and it was quite a good experience for being, I'm Italian and Irish. So I guess I'm considered a white guy. And so when I was in Japan, and all of us were roughly the same, we just looked like Americans. And we would go to these different clubs, some of which we were told, we ditched the interpreter. We had an interpreter with us that spoke Japanese, and the really nice hotel we were put up at, she went to bed just one night and thought we were going to bed too. It was probably about 11 o'clock at night. And we all communicated with each other and said, let's get out of here. And let's go to this place that I've heard of called Roppongi and check out the nightclubs. And that's what we did. We knew enough about how to get on the subways or in this case, it was getting late, so we took cabs. And sometimes the cabs wouldn't pick us up. They'd see that we were Americans, and they'd slow down, and you'd think they were about to open the door, and all of a sudden they would just speed up and leave. And I was told later that, don't be shocked if, especially the further you got out of downtown Tokyo, if, there were some Japanese that weren't crazy about seeing you. And so it was the first experience of discrimination, I guess you could call it. And at first it was funny to us, it always was funny. We were like, but at the same time, it brought to light what it feels like to be discriminated upon. And they didn't mean anything bad. I mean, it was nothing near like what some of the stuff that goes on in our United States is like. If you're African American or most recently the whole experiences that are going on in the Middle East and anti-Semitism and all that stuff. I mean, it's nothing like that. But it sure does give you an appreciation to experience something like this for what it, feels like when someone just doesn't like you because you don't look like them, or that you are not of their culture. So, without this particular episode going on and on and on, this whole trip was just amazing. We were all over the place. We went to Kyoto and we saw a lot of the Japanese temples. We did a lot of things. And again, that night in Roppongi, we partied pretty hard. And we had to be up at like 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. Japanese time the next morning because the interpreter and everybody was taking us. I think we had to go to Osaka, and it was a fairly long train ride, to Osaka from Tokyo. And, but, we still partied till about 2 or 3 a.m. before we were luckily able to get a cab driver to pick us up after numerous attempts and take us back out of this area. But really funny names, too, of the clubs. I remember one of the clubs was called Monkey Panic. We go, oh, we got to go. It's a Monkey Panic. That must be hilarious. And there was another club, and I don't remember the name, but I would say it had the same look aesthetically as what the Playboy Club was like. As a matter of fact, I think it even had like slightly changed logos on it that looked like Playboy bunny ears and things like that. It was an upper end nightclub. And so we're like, we had already had plenty to drink by then. And we're like, let's do this one now. And I remember we got in the elevator down below. And then we're on our way up, laughing and chuckling and everything like that, to whatever floor this club was on. And the door opens. And there's all these people in there, and these little tables and everything like that. And there's like I guess we would call it a bouncer. He was, like a host or whatever, all dressed up in a suit, and pretty decent sized Japanese man. And the door opens and we're all standing in the elevator with these big shit grins, thinking we're going to be welcomed like celebrities. And the whole freaking club, as far as the eyes I can see, I remember, looks, they suddenly get quiet. And, and they look at us goofballs trying to exit the elevator to join the fun. And they didn't say a thing. They were just quiet. They looked at us, You'd think we had 3 heads, all of us. And the bouncer basically took his hand and pushed us back in the elevator. And he said, "No gaijin, no gaijin," which basically means, no non-Japanese are allowed here. So we got kicked out. We didn't get a chance to experience that particular club. Down we went. We went to, and by then we were getting really silly. And again, we were also afraid that we weren't going to get picked up, and it was getting later and later, and the cabs were just passing us up every time we waved our arms. Because we were basically in a part of town we shouldn't have been in as, non-chaperoned Americans. And but we were too inebriated to realize that it wasn't hilarious, So we're walking in the dark down the streets and trying to work our way back towards what we thought was the direction of Tokyo. And we finally get picked up by this cab driver who agrees to pick us up. We get inside. And then, and this is true, the guy looked like, and this is a non-racial, don't take this as a racial comment or anything, because I don't mean it this way, but this guy looked exactly like a Japanese version of the professor on Gilligan's Island. Exactly. And I couldn't figure out what it was about him that looked familiar, but then one of the guys who was the writer on the team, of course, whispers in my ear, laughing. He goes, "Oh my God, we got picked up by the professor from Gilligan's Island." And then also all the rest of us crowded into this taxi, start laughing. He didn't appreciate it. He didn't know what the hell we were talking about or why we were laughing, but he didn't appreciate it. I think he was pondering whether to kick us out or not. Luckily, he took us to our hotel and dumped us off. And so we got there. And we went up to our room and slept for the remaining 3 hours we had. And so we all got up in the morning at the banging on our doors. This is when people didn't have a lot of cell phones or anything like that. We just had pagers. And this, because it was like 1996, probably. And so anyway, we're all just, we feel like crap, you know. We're hungover, everything, and the interpreter is rushing us to get our butts going to the bullet train. We were hungry. We didn't have breakfast, and one of the guys, the Indiana Jones guy, who maybe later on I'll mention his name. I just don't want to infringe on any privacy at this right now. But he's like, "I'm so freaking thirsty, but I can't tell what is in this vending machine." There was a vending machine right in the train at the station we were waiting for the train to come along at, and it was all in Japanese, but there was photographs of the different drinks. You know, like it looked like. The only thing you kind of recognized was Coca-Cola. But there was all this other plethora of Japanese drinks. The thing I liked was the iced coffee. They had a brand of iced coffee that was delicious. But so he orders. He sees this purple one, and it has a grape on it with something in Japanese, and he goes, "Oh, I love grape soda. I love that. I'm going to get one of those," thinking it was going to be like, our traditional grape soda that you would buy. So he puts his yen or his coin into the machine, and this cold can falls out the bottom. The train is just about to arrive. And, oh my God, I'll never forget. Again, we're all just like half asleep. Our hair is standing up, our eyes are droopy. And all he wanted was a refreshing grape cold drink to perk him up. And he takes a swig. All of a sudden, he turns he turns his head, and he spits it all out, and off to the side there was like a hedge behind us, and we're going, "What's wrong?" And he goes, and he's half horrified and half laughing his head off. And I said, "What happened? What's wrong with it?" And what he described was that in this particular drink, it actually had pieces of grapes in the drink. So he was horridly surprised to take a swig of this grape liquid and get these strange, squishy, cold little chunks in his mouth. You know, when he was already feeling nauseated, probably as it was from the night before. And he spits this out, and he was very pissed. He was kind of pissed off too. He's like, God, I'm so frustrated not to be able to tell what the hell something's going to taste like. You know, something that looks sweet tastes salty and fishy, and something that looks savory tastes sugary. And, you know, he was just disheveled. But it was pretty funny. And then we boarded the train to Osaka. And, you know, not worth getting into the details of that, because it was just to see the area and take in the culture and things like that. And we also did that in Kyoto. We went to some shrines and got to go inside there and had a beautiful evening. And, you know, where you walk and then the streets had all these beautiful lights, and there was these beautiful little shrines, you know, hundreds of years old, where you could, you know, take a sip of water with a cup outside of it, and you know, it was some sort of blessing and different things like that. It was a beautiful trip, and we bonded greatly, and I'll never forget it. Actually, it was a wonderful trip, and I secured some really good friendships on that trip. So there's another little tidbit on my experiences as a Walt Disney Imagineer. Next one, we move on.